the whole. This is all new to me, so
Yeah, well, it's
kind of
fine.
nerve-wracking. My palms are all sweaty.
No problem. Take your time. Okay, this is Special Agent Josh Mead with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Today is May 14th, 2012. It's approximately 4:30 p.m. The following will be a tape sworn interview with Officer Michael Dill with the Daytona Beach Police Department in regards to the officer-involved shooting that occurred April 28th, 2012. Also present for the interview is Dill's attorney, Attorney Mike Lambert, and the interview is being conducted at the Daytona Beach field office of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Officer Dill, I asked you before, I'll ask you again on tape. You're here on your own free will, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Nobody's compelled you to be here?
No.
Okay. You understand you can stop this interview and leave at any time. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. Having said that, will you raise your right hand for me? Do you swear and affirm the statement you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Yes.
Okay. All right, and we have 3 photographs. I just explain everything because people can't see on the audio tape. So we have 3 photographs here. One kind of an overall between basically the airport encompassing Richard Petty Boulevard to what we know to be Flight Line Road in the parking lot. And then a second photograph of where we developed crime scene 1 and a blow up of crime scene 2. If you would just start by telling us your story. You said that you were at a Subway on Bevel Road, and what happened after that?
That's correct. I was at Subway at 1104 Bevel Road with Officer Rob Carter. We had just finished eating our meal when we heard a call go out over the radio about a man sitting in a vehicle in the airport parking lot with waving around a gun.
Do they give a vehicle description?
They did. I'm not sure exactly what the vehicle description was
Okay.
that they gave.
Okay.
At that time, I decided to respond as a backup unit. I got in my patrol vehicle and started heading towards the airport. I drove. Well, before that, I notified my dispatcher that I would be responding as a backup unit. I then drove westbound on Bevel Road until I got to Clyde Morris, and then proceeded northbound on Clyde Morris until I reached Richard Petty Boulevard. I then made a westbound turn onto Richard Petty. I continued on Richard Petty until I got past Hagen Terrace, I believe.
Yeah.
Hagen Terrace. There's 2 curves there until I got past those 2 curves. During this time, I heard the dispatcher tell us that a deputy observed the vehicle. As he did, it fled. The next transmission I heard was Officer Mersereau saying the vehicle's turning onto Richard Petty. It had a blown right rear tire, and it was most likely going to crash out in the area. I then observed a silver 4-door. It looked like a Ford Crown Victoria or a Mercury Grand Marquis driving eastbound. It looked to be swerving just a little bit. And then I observed Officer Mercereau's vehicle behind it. He had his lights and siren going. I pulled over to the very far right side of the road, which would be the north side of Richard Petty Boulevard, almost to where my right side tires were touching the curb. Both vehicles passed me, the suspect and Officer Mercereau's vehicle. Once they safely passed me, I made a U-turn and began following Officer Mersereau. Then they reached the first curve, which I had recently just exited. That's when the vehicle attempted to make the curve, spun into the median, and came to a stop. Officer Mersereau stopped his vehicle on the driver's side of the vehicle. I believe he was in the outside lane of the eastbound lanes. I then observed Officer Mersereau running towards the driver's side of the vehicle with his gun drawn. As he did so, he got approximately 2 to 3 feet from the vehicle, and that's when I observed Officer Mersereau began doing quick step backwards and firing his weapon.
Could you hear him yelling anything?
I didn't exactly hear him yelling anything, but I could tell he was yelling.
Okay. And now's a good point just to ask you. It was Mersereau, yourself, and any of the other officers involved for that matter this night, were they all wearing their Class B Daytona Beach Police Department issued uniforms?
Yes, we all were.
All the vehicles that were involved, Daytona Beach Department vehicles that were involved, were they all marked patrol vehicles?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So when you were pulling up, and just for the sake of the audible recording, the suspect vehicle you marked here on this piece of paper, showing that they're basically facing back
To the direction they came.
the direction in which they came, and they're kind of driver's side to driver's side, Mersereau's vehicle to the subject vehicle.
Yes.
All right. And when Mersereau came out of his car, you said his gun was drawn, and he had, was it one-handed, two-handed?
I believe it was two-handed.
Okay. And you could see that he was yelling something, but you couldn't hear what he was saying.
Yes.
All right. He got about 2 to 3 feet from the vehicle, and then what happened next?
He then began firing his weapon towards the driver of the vehicle,
Okay.
which at this point in time, I still had not seen. As Officer Mersereau was doing so, he fell to the ground, and that's when the suspect vehicle made its turn to continue eastbound on Richard Petty. At this point, I was exiting my vehicle, and I yelled to Josh, "Are you okay?" He goes, "Yes, that motherfucker just shot at me. Go get him." I then got back into my patrol vehicle and took off after the suspect vehicle.
And you said the suspect vehicle was going eastbound? Okay. Just for the record, do you remember how many times Mersereau shot?
I think it was 5. It was between 5 and 6.
Okay. And how do you know he shot? Did you see it or hear it or both?
You could hear it.
Okay.
I heard it.
Okay. All right. So at that point in time, you knew or believed that the subject was armed because Mersereau told you that he had shot at him. Is that correct?
Yes, he said that motherfucker shot at me.
Okay. All right. Did you know if Mersereau was okay at that point?
At that point in time, I did not get a definitive answer from him if he had or had not been shot.
Okay.
He's just yelled, "That motherfucker shot at me. Go get him."
Okay. All right. What happened next?
I then re-entered. I got back into the driver's seat of my patrol vehicle, and I took off after the suspect vehicle. At that time, I notified my dispatcher of what had just transpired. I told them that there had been shots fired between 64 and the suspect, 64 being Officer Josh Mersereau. I then asked for permission from a supervisor to pursue the vehicle.
Okay.
I then heard one of my supervisors, I don't remember which one exactly, give me permission to pursue the vehicle. His precise words were yes.
Okay.
I then began calling out the pursuit. I didn't quite catch up to the vehicle until, I wish we had names for these curves.
Well, we call it the southbound, the curve, the south curve, where it turns to the south.
Until about mid-curve of the south curve.
Okay. Do you remember the condition of the vehicle, the subject vehicle at that time?
It still had a blown right tire.
Okay.
Right rear tire, sorry.
Okay.
We continued south or east,
Yeah,
south.
southeast,
We'll go, until we got to what we now know as Flightline Road, where he made a right turn and slowed his vehicle down to basically a crawl. Once he made that turn, he exited the vehicle and began running.
Okay. And so we can over
there we
here.
go, that's better.
So which way did he run? This indicates north.
South.
Okay. All right. So did you see what he looked like at that point? Subject.
A light colored shirt is what I saw.
Okay. What happened next?
That's when Officer Mersereau, I now know at the time, or now know, a patrol vehicle passed me on the driver's side of my vehicle, past the suspect vehicle, and then the next thing I see is the suspect in the air. He had been struck by the patrol vehicle.
Okay. What happened next?
At that point in time, I then turned my attention back towards the suspect vehicle because I honestly thought that the suspect was down or dead, seriously hurt or dead.
Okay.
I then turned my attention back towards the suspect vehicle. I get to the hood of my car where I observe what I know or what looked like the top of somebody's head in the passenger seat. I then had my firearm out at the time. I point my firearm at the vehicle and I began giving verbal commands to the passenger to let me see your hands, put your hands on the roof.
Okay. And is that that's the first time you noticed there was a passenger?
That's correct.
Okay. Before we went on tape, right around the same point in time, so we talked about, what you were thinking or what you were feeling based on the circumstances surrounding the call that you received, circumstances surrounding what we are now calling crime scene 1. What was going on through your mind during that time?
I was scared.
What were you scared of?
I did not know if this other person had any weapons inside the car. I didn't know what to expect from the vehicle itself or the occupant.
Okay.
As I was giving my verbal commands to the passenger, I then hear several shots from this area where the suspect had been struck by the patrol vehicle. I then see the suspect running through the parking lot. Can I slow down? I'm trying to.
Sure,
I'm
you
getting ahead of myself.
take all the time you want. If you want to go back to a certain point, by all means, do it.
I'm getting ahead of myself. I hear several shots being fired. I heard approximately.
Let's start back. I'll restart you. Okay, so you see who you now know to be Mersereau come around you and strike the suspect, and you see his legs go up in a Y, you said earlier, in the air. Okay, and boom, did you see him land or see where he landed?
I did not.
Okay, all right. So you thought that that suspect was
Seriously injured or dead.
Yeah, he wasn't a problem anymore, you thought. So that's why you turned your direction to the suspect vehicle.
Correct.
You notice there's a passenger, and you're pointing your gun and attention and direction at that person and tell them to put their hands on the roof. Okay. All right. What happens next?
That is when I hear approximately 4 or 5 shots, larger caliber, as well as 1 or 2 smaller caliber sound like a hiss coming from this area over here.
What is it, based on your training or your life experience, your training, everything else, what is that telling you?
That there's two separate firearms being shot.
Okay.
At that time, once the shots exchanged, I observed the suspect running from the area where he was hit with the vehicle through the parking lot. Once he got to this point right here, is when I observed him make a turn and an arm come out pointing towards Officer Mersereau, who was about right in here somewhere. At this time, there's still larger caliber rounds being fired, and that's when I take my my firearm off of the suspect vehicle to the actual suspect himself and begin firing, because I believe that he's still trying to shoot at Josh.
Okay. You described the one caliber as a hiss and another caliber as a bang or a very loud pop. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
My way of saying larger caliber, smaller. It really did sound like a hiss. It's like a.
Okay.
Well.
And there's about 1 to 2 of those hiss sounds.
Yes.
Okay.
That I can distinctly remember.
All right. So you said that he's basically parallel. The subject is basically parallel to you in the parking lot as he's running. So you said he looked very thin, but then you could tell he turned because he got wide.
Correct.
Okay. You don't know if he was facing towards you or the other way, but all you knew is that there was an arm extended back from the direction he was traveling from, which is where Mersereau was standing.
Correct, because he was. I believe the correct term is silhouetted.
Okay. All right. And did you know Mersereau's condition at this point? Did you know if he'd been injured?
At this point in time, I still didn't know if he had been hit or not.
Okay.
From whether it was from scene 1 or what had just transpired at scene 2.
Do you remember how many times you heard the larger caliber shots after that first initial exchange? In other words, the subject was hit by Mersereau's vehicle. He thought he was done, but then next thing you know, there's an exchange of gunfire. There was 4 to 5 shots by a larger caliber, 1 to 2 shots by a smaller caliber, but then there was more shots after that took place. Do you remember how many of those there were?
No, not exactly, because there was quite a few.
All right, so then the silhouetting effect happens. You see the subject pointing back towards Mersereau, and what were your thoughts and feelings about that?
I thought he was still trying to shoot Josh.
Okay. And is that when you fired your...
That's when I began to fire my weapon, yes.
Okay. And the weapon you fired is the one that we collected from you that night, crime scene did. It's your department-issued...
Correct.
.40 caliber Glock pistol?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you remember how many shots you fired?
At the time, no. Until later on, I was able to actually see my shell casings on the ground. And I counted 6.
So you didn't hear or see your gun firing. You just counted the casings afterwards.
Correct. I did not see my own muzzle flashing. I didn't even hear my own weapon discharging.
Okay. And Mr. Lambert had said earlier that he recalled your memory about not having time to call out to Mersereau.
To find out if he was okay.
Okay. And that was, at what point in time was that?
Right after this whole, the exchanges over in this area.
Okay. Right. Now, you could see Mersereau in this area.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
Because if I remember correctly, there's a a street light right here, and you could just see it shining down on him.
Okay. All right. After you discharged your firearm, what happened next?
After I fired several rounds from my weapon, I observed the suspect, the silhouette, go to the ground. I then see Officer Mersereau approach him, and that's when I turned my attention back to the vehicle. Officer Carter was not too far behind Mersereau.
Okay.
At that point in time, myself and another officer, which I don't recall exactly who it was, approached the suspect vehicle. I approached on the passenger side of the vehicle. He approached on the driver's side. As I got to the front passenger door, I observed a female who was still sitting inside the vehicle with her hands on the roof. And I asked her if she had any weapons or are there any weapons in the car. She goes, "No, I've been shot. Please help me."
Okay.
At that point in time, Officer Conley arrives to where I'm at on the passenger side of the vehicle, and we pull her out of the vehicle, lay her on the grass. We ask her, "Where have you been shot?" She tells us, "I don't know, but help me." We then noticed a lot of blood on her left side, and we began cutting off her shirt and her bra, and we found a single gunshot entry wound under the left breast.
Okay.
And then after that, we pretty much just sat and waited for the paramedics as I was sitting there talking to her.
Did she say who had shot her, or did she know how she'd been shot?
No.
Do you know if when you shot your firearm, did any of your bullets, any of your rounds hit the subject? Do you know?
The suspect himself?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Did he fell to the ground after you discharged your firearm?
Correct.
Okay. And I asked you before, I've already conducted an interview with Officer Pearsall, but do you remember seeing him at the scene or seeing or hearing him fire his firearm?
No.
Okay. Mr. Lambert?
Once the female passenger had been removed from the vehicle and you continued to talk to her, do you recall asking her to squeeze your hand, trying to keep her alert throughout the whole process?
Yes, I do.
And do you remember her having the ability to squeeze your hand?
Yes, she did. I remember asking her name, her age.
Did she ever give any other information about the shooting?
No.
If
All she could tell me was, "I've been shot." She couldn't tell me where.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to add?
No.
Okay. It's 4:53 p.m.